All right, folks, we just crossed the line, a major one. Kash Patel just confirmed what millions of Americans have suspected and what the media tried to bury. The FBI had human sources embedded inside the crowd on January 6th. Let me say that again. The FBI had actual informants on the ground in real time during what they called an insurrection. And we're not talking about security agents stationed outside the Capitol. We're talking about undercover human assets walking around the crowd, blending in with MAGA hats and flags, listening, watching, recording, and maybe more. So why is this important? Because this was the event that they used. In fact, they didn't try, they were successful. This was the event that they used to destroy lives, to silence speech. They locked people up without trial and claimed moral superiority for 3 years straight. But now we know that they were in on it from the inside. The question's no longer, were they there? The question is, what did they do while they were there, right? So here's where it gets even more outrageous, guys. FBI Director Christopher Wray, who's supposed to be, representing justice and integrity, he hid that fact for years. Only when Congress grilled him under oath, backed him into a corner, and burned through hours of legal dancing did he finally utter, or basically they kind of squeezed it out of him. He finally stuttered out the truth. Yes, there were FBI sources present on January 6th. He didn't offer that information voluntarily. He didn't say how many. He didn't say what they were doing. He muttered the minimum. Why? Because the moment he says it clearly, the moment it's out in the open, everything changes. So let me ask you guys, if these were just neutral observers, why hide them, right? If these sources didn't provoke anything, why lie about them for years? If this was all above board, why stash the truth in documents that they never thought Kash Patel would find in hidden rooms? Because let's be clear, Kash Patel didn't just uncover the fact that they were there. He found where the evidence was hidden, buried in obscure filing systems, deliberately placed where no one was supposed to be looking. And here's what they found. Kash says those documents, they're being turned over to Congress right now in waves, week by week, rolling basis. This ain't over, guys. This is actually just the beginning. So now we face the real question, the one that they never really wanted you to ask. Who gave the order? Because FBI agents don't just wander into political protests on their own. Someone pretty high up signed off on this. Someone inside the Department of Justice, or maybe even the White House, authorized the deployment of human sources that day. Was this observation, or was it orchestration? Was this law enforcement, or was this a setup? So we're going to name names here, guys. We're going to expose just how deep the rock goes. So don't click away, guys, because, guys, when we come back, I want to share with you guys exactly who signed off, what agency, what office, and was this part of a broader federal strategy to bait, frame, and even destroy Trump's base from within? Guys, if you appreciate the daily news updates, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video. We cannot be silenced. There's too many of us. Guys, we're about to see exactly what happens when the truth refuses to be buried. Now, if you're feeling like your Medicare plan is draining your wallet, I can promise you, you are not alone. Leslie Taylor, she was in the same spot up until she called Chapter. Now she's saving $1,000 a year. Sharon Bertusik, she lost Medicaid coverage, but Chapter stepped in and they got her a plan with no premium, no medication costs, and no copay. Well, actually, the copay actually got dropped from $89 to $20. That's still a massive win. Guys, Chapter's advisors, they don't work for insurance companies. Heck no. They work for you, and they work completely free. So all I know is that they're amazing and they're friendly. And if you haven't reached out to them, here's your chance. Give them a call right now at 909-563-8279. Or better yet, hit them up on the web at askchapter.org/Ron. Save more, stress less, and drop me a comment and let me know how much money you saved with Chapter. I appreciate you guys. All right, so you know they were there. You got FBI human sources on the ground on January 6th. But now the real bombshell. Who sent them? Because these weren't just some rogue agents freelancing for some like weekend overtime or something like that, right? This was planned. This was coordinated. This was approved. And someone with real power had to sign off on that operation. Kash Patel said it flat out. This wasn't field level. This was directive. This was a directive that came from the top. And you know what that means, right? We're talking about the Department of Justice, the DOJ, possibly the White House, or even unelected staffers running shadow operations behind the scenes. And here's where it really all comes together. At the same time, Kash Patel and Congress were uncovering the J6 informants, they were also seeing a massive scandal erupt from a watchdog report showing President Biden didn't personally sign key executive orders. They were signed with an auto pen. This is a mechanical signature device. He says, well, actually, so let me get this straight. Biden didn't sign the orders. He may not have authorized the FBI actions, but somehow things kept moving. This means somebody else was wielding presidential power. And so now, let's get even darker here, okay, guys? If the FBI had sources on the inside of that crowd, what were they doing? Were they just standing there and watching, listening and reporting intel in real time? Or were they more involved? Were they pushing people forward, whispering to agitators, fueling and funneling bad information? Was this an observation mission, or was it an engineered tap? Because you can't deploy sources into a politically volatile crowd during a joint session of Congress without a game plan, right? Or, either that or you wanted to start something. Maybe you wanted to stop something, or maybe you wanted to cause something, right? So now Kash Patel he's being very careful. He's being very, very careful with his words. But the breadcrumbs are everywhere. He said the documents are being turned over. The truth is coming. But you got to ask yourself, why did Christopher Wray lie? Why did they bury the files? Why are they still dragging their feet on releasing footage, identities, and internal communications? Because if it ever comes out who ordered the deployment of these human sources, if it ever turns out that they weren't just passive observers, then this wasn't just a failure of intelligence. This was a psychological operation against the American people. Now, hang out with me, guys. Don't go anywhere, because I want to expose the files that they hid and the places that they hid them. Kash Patel, he found documents they never thought anybody would discover stashed away. All right, so we need to talk about what they tried to hide, all right? Because this wasn't just the FBI, being present on January 6th. It was the documents too. It was the files. It was the evidence. And Kash Patel, he didn't just stumble across these papers laying on a desk. He actually found them in like obscure, out-of-network locations, places the Bureau never expected anybody to look. Why? Because the truth was just too explosive. These documents connected the dots between Crossfire Hurricane and January 6th. Now, you guys remember Crossfire Hurricane, right? The phony Russia investigation that was used to spy on sitting presidents? Well, Kash Patel was one of the few who helped blow that wide open. But now he says he has found material in FBI holdings he didn't even know existed. And these materials were stashed on purpose, not in some regular evidence databases, not in visible archives. They were hidden like a crime scene, because these were essentially a crime scene, right? Now listen to this. Since Kash Patel recovered these buried files, a rolling disclosure has begun. That means every week, new batches of documents are being handed to Congress. Not one dump, not a press stunt, a slow systemic exposure of everything they try to hide. And let me ask you this. Why now? Because the cover-up cracked. They know Congress has the scent, and now they know Kash Patel and his team will not stop digging. So what's in these files? Well, evidence of internal FBI communications, deployment memos, possibly even records of who signed off on the January 6th source placements, and Crossfire Hurricane materials that tie all of this together. In other words, they were building the narrative before the chaos ever even happened. This wasn't just incompetence. This was intentional concealment. They planned, they planted, they erased, they executed. And they thought nobody would ever find out. But now Congress is getting it. America's getting it. You're getting it. You're watching this video. And next, I want to share with you guys, we need to talk about these other scandals that they tried to shut down, including the pipe bomber case that nearly disappeared until Kash Patel and Dan Bongino brought it back from the dead. So if you guys appreciate this, hit the like button, subscribe, and keep watching, because I want to expose the prior FBI leadership's willful sabotage of critical investigations, from the DC pipe bomb threat to a cocaine cover-up inside the White House. Guys, it gets worse, way worse. And I want to name names. Now, if you thought hiding FBI sources on January 6th was bad, just wait, because what Kash Patel just revealed next is going to make your blood boil. The pipe bomber case, the one that could have taken out the DNC and RNC headquarters, yeah, that investigation, the FBI literally shut it down. They walked it slow. They delayed it. They buried it. You're telling me a coordinated attack with explosives near the U.S. Capitol on the same day Congress was certifying the election wasn't the FBI's top priority? That's not negligence. That is intentional suppression, is it not? Kash Patel said it himself. The previous FBI leadership let this case go cold until he and Dan Bongino came in and reactivated it. And guess what? They got new leads, strong ones, leads that could crack the whole thing wide open. So why would the old guard ignore it? I think it's pretty simple, guys. Because if the bomber had ties to somebody inconvenient, someone politically explosive, that would have shattered the narrative that they built. This wasn't about justice. It was about control. And it gets worse. While all of this was happening, while the FBI was playing politics with pipe bombs, they were also wasting agents' time chasing down copycats and social media trolls because of James Comey. Yeah, you heard that right, guys. Remember when the disgraced former director James Comey was walking on the beach with seashells marked 8647? That's not funny. That's not art. That's code for assassinate the 47th president. And you know what happened next, right? Social media blew up. Copycats started spreading similar messages, hashtags, memes, actual threats against Trump's life. And the FBI agents had to be pulled off serious investigations. Human trafficking cases, fentanyl busts, child predator strings. Guys, so they had to be pulled off so that they could chase down these politically fueled distractions. And that's exactly what this was. Nothing but a big, massive distraction, because James Comey, he wanted to go viral on Instagram with a veiled death threat. Let me be crystal clear. Every hour an agent spent chasing those threats was an hour that they weren't protecting a child, they weren't busting a cartel, or stopping fentanyl from flooding our streets. That is what this politicized circus has cost us. This ain't leadership. This is sabotage. And the American people, we are the ones that are paying for this, guys, in blood, in chaos, in lies. So I want to take a step back and ask the real hard legal question. If the FBI had sources on the ground, if they buried the pipe bomber case, if they chased political ghost stories instead of doing their job, what does this mean for the prosecutions they pushed through? Were any of those legitimate, or were they built on sand? So I want to take a breath here. And now I want to ask the real question. If the FBI had sources on the ground during January 6th, if they buried cases, hid approvals, slow-walked bombs, and pulled agents off real cases, then what does that mean for every single January 6th prosecution that's taken place since? Because now we're not talking about just optics. We're talking about the legal foundation of dozens, maybe hundreds of criminal cases. If the FBI had embedded sources who were reporting in real time, or worse, participating in crowd behavior, that's a legal bomb. That's entrapment. That's a rigged game. Kash Patel said it plainly. This isn't just about uncovering truth. This is about unraveling consequences. We now have defense attorneys, watchdogs, even former prosecutors questioning whether the J6 cases hold up under scrutiny. Because if the FBI had operatives shaping events in real time, the line between protester and provoker is really no longer clear. And let me be very clear here. This doesn't mean everybody was innocent. This means the government may have played a role in shaping the very chaos they claim to stop. Let that sit in. Now, this is where things go from dark to nuclear, because Kash Patel, alongside a bombshell watchdog report, just confirmed something that was so massive, I still can't even believe mainstream media is not wall to wall with this stuff. Joe Biden didn't even sign the executive orders coming out the White House. They were signed with an auto pen. That's right, guys. The president wasn't present, wasn't signing, wasn't commanding. So if President Biden wasn't authorizing executive action, if he wasn't giving FBI directives, if he wasn't managing DOJ strategy, then who the hell was, right? Let me lay this out for you guys. FBI sources deployed on January 6th. Executive orders signed by machine. White House insiders running the show behind the scenes. That's not corruption. That's a constitutional crisis. That's an unelected staffer, maybe even a cabal of them, running a shadow presidency. We don't elect staffers. We don't elect assistants or aides or deputy policy advisors. We elect the presidents. And if Biden wasn't acting as commander in chief, then what happened in those first 100 days? Those executive actions, those DOJ investigations, they're built on fraud. They're built on silence. They're built on a lie. So now the only thing left to ask is, will there be justice? Will there be consequences? Or will this end up being swept under the rug in Washington, D.C.? Because next, we need to talk about these prosecutions, the public trust, and of course, whether America's broken system can actually hold anybody accountable anymore. So if you appreciate these updates, hit the like button and subscribe, guys. Now, we've exposed the players. We've named the scandals. We traced the orders. We've unsealed the files. Here's the final question. The one that really kind of breaks the system. Will anybody be held accountable? Will there be real prosecutions, criminal charges, actual jail time for people who lied under oath, buried evidence, and orchestrated like political chaos under the guise of national security? Or is this just going to be just another little blue ribbon panel, another dusting hearing, another Washington nothing burger? Kash Patel made it clear. He's turning over documents. He's working with Congress. He's doing everything in his power to break through this bureaucratic firewall. But the prosecutions, that power still sits in the DOJ. And under this administration, let's be honest, it's going to take a political earthquake to move the needle. You think Merrick Garland's DOJ is going to charge itself? Do you think Joe Biden's appointees are going to arrest the very people who signed off on the lies, the setups, and the cover-ups? Not a chance unless we demand it. Because here's the thing they don't want you to realize. They didn't just come for Trump. They actually came for all of us. They used January 6th to justify surveillance. They used the FBI like a weapon. They silenced whistleblowers. They corrupted the courts. And now they want you to move on, to forget it. Not on this channel. Not today, guys. Not while there's breath in my lungs and truth in my voice, guys. They told you it was an insurrection. Well, it turns out this was infiltration. They told you it was chaos. Turns out it was orchestrated. They told you it was justice. It turns out it was vengeance. So if even one innocent American was charged, convicted, or locked away because of a lie, a setup, a fake informant, or a political directive, then this country has a duty to fight for the truth, right? Not for Trump, not for any party, but for the Constitution, for justice, for America. So I'm going to ask you to do your part. Hit the like button, share this video, comment down below, tag your senator, tag your representative, demand answers, demand prosecutions, demand the truth. Because I promise you guys, this story right here, it's far from over. Just getting started.